I will create a little YouTube video and it will go on our YouTube channel, Alliance Française de Tucson. So that's another way to watch or to rewatch if you would like to do that. It should run around 60 minutes with a little extra time for questions.
Yeah.
It might, depending on, where James branches off every once in a while, it might take a little longer than that.
James, and it's tangents, so sometimes it takes a long time. But it's going to take an hour. It's more take.
All right. So we've got a few more people coming in.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, here we go.
Welcome.
So James, go ahead and begin.
Hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to be back. So as Victoria said, we're going to do Montmartre Part 2. So we basically, when we first started the Balade Parisienne, we started by climbing up to the Place du Tertre. Now we're going to slowly go down and visit really and kind of get into the spirit and the heart of Montmartre. So what I would like to do with this presentation is probably a lot less historical than last time when we basically went back in time and talked about, and you had a lot of historical information. Here we're going to talk more about everyday life, about everyday cultural references. And I'm going to ask you a few questions here and there to know how, if you know the person and if you're aware of such and such reference. So just as a recap, Paris is in the north of Paris. No, Montmartre is in the north of Paris. So as you can see, the little square, the blue square there indicates where, compared to the rest of the city, where Montmartre is. And we ended, so I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. 2 years ago, yeah, maybe. We ended at the Place du Tertre. So is everybody comfortable with it? We are at the top of Montmartre. We can oversee all of Paris. The Sacré-Cœur is 2 minutes away, walking distance. And so let's start. And what are we going to explore today? So we're going to, first of all, go to the Montmartre vineyards called the Vignes du Clos de Montmartre. And then we will visit the Maison Rose. And then we will discover probably one of the most surprising landmarks of Montmartre, the buste of Dalida, and we'll discuss who Dalida is and how important she is in French culture. Then we will go to a sculpture called Le Passe-Muraille, which will let us discover who Marcel Aimé is. Then we will discover probably the most famous landmark of Montmartre, the Moulin de la Galette, and understand what it means within the story of Montmartre and within what it is today. Then we'll go to probably the chicest, the most sophisticated part of Montmartre, l'Avenue Junot, and discover some of the very interesting, beautiful architecture that l'Avenue Junot offers. And I will let you discover probably the chicest place in all of the 18th, l'Hôtel Particulier, which is really the top-notch, really trendy part of Montmartre. We'll also discover a nice boulangerie, which, I think we all agree that French bread is probably one of the best things on earth, and French pâtisserie. So we'll go there. And then we'll go to a cemetery. So because at the bottom of Montmartre, you have the Montmartre, Cimetière de Montmartre, which is, one of the main cemeteries of Paris within the city, surrounded by buildings. So in of itself, it's an interesting place to be. Cemeteries always are. And it's also, because it's surrounded and nearly compounded by the city, it's really an interesting place and shows like the contrast between old architecture and new architecture and different spaces, and how the city, manages those different spaces. And we'll finish with very briefly with Le Moulin Rouge, and that's that. So I hope you like it, and let's go. So I will also show you a little bit where we are. But so here, just to give you some pointers on this cover picture, like the painting. So this is the painting from a famous, well, famous,
Famous.
famous enough. I mean, he's famous within Montmartre, called Maurice Utrillo. If you know a little bit about the Impressionists, he's the son of Suzanne Valadon. Suzanne Valadon the only female painter of the Impressionists. So Maurice Utrillo is her son, and he is probably one of the most famous Paris painters of Paris. So he was born in 1883 and he passed away in 1955. And he really is celebrated for his depiction of Montmartre. He spent most of his life there in Montmartre and really found inspiration in the vibrant atmosphere of the neighborhood. He, like many painters and many artists at the time, faced personal struggles, probably no money, no real recognition. And he also, unfortunately, struggled with alcoholism. I think also because despite being the son of Suzanne Valadon, he had a very difficult childhood. So, and he found a lot of his solace and inspiration in the art. He is characterized by many very muted colors, browns and greens, and which both reflect the turmoil of his life, but also a rather raw and authentic depiction of Montmartre and the people living in there. So he is very much known. So this painting is one of many depictions of Moulin la Galette. If you look on Google, you'll find that he probably painted, I won't say hundreds, but tens of these very impromptu artworks. And it really captures something that we're going to see throughout the presentation, is that, basically until the 1920s, Montmartre was basically countryside. It was a village. I mean, it was in the 20s, it was part of Paris, and, urbanizing slowly, but until like 1900, when you were going to Montmartre, you were going to the countryside. So, and that you can see that this very bucolic, very non-urbanized atmosphere, which I think is interesting. So I recommend Maurice Utrillo. He has, unfortunately, he's not that well known anymore, but he's still very much an important painter for Montmartre in the Montmartre history. So here you go. Sorry, so you have more information here. So I like this. I like this picture because he really seems not that happy to be photographed and not that welcoming, but he's he's an interesting character. So now we are going, after this little tangent on Maurice Utrillo, let's start the walk itself, the balade itself. So here if you go down Rue Norvins and you quickly arrive to Rue des Saules. So Rue des Saules, Saule in French means a willow tree. So it shows that also, again, this idea of bucolic, of the prominence of nature at Montmartre at one point. And I would like to show you. So this is the Rue des Saules facing down. That's the Rue des Saules facing up. Here again, you remember that Montmartre is built on a hill, so everything is always going up or down. And living in Paris, that's the reality that you have to accept. You're always going to be climbing something. So, and let's go to the vineyard. So what are the vineyards? So in the middle of Montmartre lies I would say, a charming vineyard, a very small vineyard that really is quite an astonishing spot within the bustling cityscape of Paris. Again, you remember that Paris is a very mineral, very urbanized city where everybody is basically on top of each other. So when you have this kind of strange vineyard in the middle of the city, it is quite remarkable. And it stands as a testament I would say even a vestige of what Montmartre was at a certain time. So the vineyard itself dates back from the Roman era, where basically I think it covered all of the hill. Now it's just less, it's a half an acre, but it really symbolizes what Montmartre was at a certain time. So very much the fact that it's kept, its preservation is more of a symbol than we actually as a means to produce wine. But it is really much, it captures this bohemian, bucolic spirit that Montmartre still embodies within in Paris. So that's the vineyard. You can see here, it really is, it's a real vineyard, but it's very small. So it probably produces like maybe a half a bottle or no, probably 10 bottles. And also because Paris is not really known for its intense sun exposure, it probably is not very good wine. But nonetheless, every year we have what we call la fête des vendanges. So vendange in French the is a grape harvest. It's when you harvest the grapes. So in September, after the summer, you harvest the grape when they're full of sun and you create them and you make the wine. So at the end of October or maybe early November, you have a celebration called La Fête des Vendanges. It's an annual grape harvest festival. It's a lively event that attracts locals and tourists alike, offering music, art, food, and of course, wine. I don't think, then again, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't been to the Fête des Vendanges a long time. But I don't think you drink the wine from the vineyard, but you celebrate nature and you celebrate the the harvest through that celebration. I know that there are celebrations, there are parades throughout the day. I myself participated in a few of those parades because as a child um, what's the name? You're
Required?
you're you're required. It's not something that you don't volunteer to do it. Basically, your school is required to do a parade. So we would walk in the streets among other schools and to celebrate the grape harvest. But it really is probably the most Montmartre, Montmartre true, typical of Montmartre neighborhood and spirit. And it has become, with a lot of these very popular moments, it has become extremely popular in the last few years. So that's a good thing. During the Fête de la Vendange, there's just so many people. It's unbelievable. So definitely, if you're Paris and the Fête de la Vendange is happening, I would recommend you go. So as you can see, there are a lot. So the picture is not great, but you can see that it is a fête. It is there are parties. People get, people drink, people, eat, and they have just a very good time. And it's a great, great opportunity to discover Montmartre in a festive way. So, so that's the vineyards. So that's a really important part of Montmartre. It's a little out there, but that's Montmartre really there shows that it's a different space within Paris. It has its own history and its own culture. Of course, because it's France, it's a culture focused on wine and drinking wine, but that's living in France. So let's continue the walk, and here we arrive at Rue de l'Abreuvoir. So an abreuvoir is a water trough. That's where the animals drink. So again, it's the indication that Paris, Montmartre, at a certain point was very much a place where you had animals, you had nature, you had gardens, you had even agriculture. So it's an interesting symbol of what Montmartre was only maybe 100 years ago. So you can see that, I mean, it's difficult. It's a beautiful street, and it goes down, and you have beautiful architecture. It's very leafy, and at the same time, it's just a normal street in Paris. I like it because I had a friend who used to live there, and I would go there all the time. So it has a very everyday feel to it, but it's still, when you think about it, it's a beautiful space. And the most beautiful part of La Rue de la Beauvoir is La Maison Rose, which used to be a very famous restaurant, and since now has become more of a, like a lunch, uh, breakfast, lunch, and tea place. I definitely recommend it. It's very simple food, and all of the addresses are on this
The main page.
on the main page, so you can definitely find it. It has, it's simple bread, it's charcuterie, it's good wine. It really is the essence of what we called in France la bonne franquette, which is this. Let's not do anything too complicated. Let's just take bread, wine, and cheese and charcuterie, and let's have a good time around, good hearty food. So, and it's very charming. Definitely, if you go there on a on a spring day or summer day, and you find a table outside, you'll have a delightful time. It's unfortunately very touristy, so you need to find the good time to go there. The earlier, the better. So I definitely recommend it. So as you go down the streets, so here, if you can see, basically the Maison Rose is there. So you're going down and you arrive at the bottom of la Rue d'Abreuvoir. And here on the left-hand side, you find a strange bronze statue. It's not really a statue, it's a bust, but it's a fairly surprising bust. So that's the bust of Dalida, which has in recent years become probably the most famous attraction in Montmartre. People all over the world come there. So it's it's a very revealing bust. Again, France always tends to like to show forms and bodies. And so this is my first question. Who knows who Dalida is? Ah, tell us.
Raise
So
your hand if you know her or have heard of her, have heard her music.
She's a sing. She's a singer.
Mhm.
she is a singer. She is a singer, definitely. So here is Dalida. So who is Dalida? So Dalida is probably one of the most iconic French singers. She has captivated audiences with her chanting voice and really charismatic presence. And she has left in I would say, the French psyche an indelible mark. She was born in Egypt in 1933 from Italian heritage, and she in 1950 she won a singing competition, which kind of propelled her to the forefront of French music. And she was very magnetic, very seductive. She had a beautiful um, uh, uh, deep voice, a beautiful deep voice, and she was a consummated performer. So unlike many French singers who tend to uh, promote, put forward their singing and their the lyrics, she was more about performance and entertainment. And in many ways, she was more of an Anglo-Saxon entertainer. And she had a very emotional performance and diverse repertoire spanning multiple languages because she was international. So she could speak, she sang in Arab, she sang in Italian, she sang in French, she also sang in English. And some of her most famous hits are Bambino, Parole, Parole. So Parole, Parole is the French version of the famous Mina Italian song, which if if you want to discover Italian music or European music, I would definitely recommend listening to that song. And Gigi L'Amoroso. So, and she became extremely famous. Unfortunately, she is also behind the glamour and the glitz. She lived a very difficult life, full of heartbreak and tragedy. She was married several times, but most of her husbands died. She was never able to build a family, and she experienced failed relationships and personal losses. And she really was able to channel through and remain resilient through all of that heartache, through her music and through her performances. And despite her tragic end in 1987, she has since 1987 she has never been more famous. To be perfectly honest, when we were growing up, Victoria and I, Dalida was a little bit an object of ridicule. We thought she was just too much. She was over the top. She, you know, even at the time, as you can see on that picture, everybody would make fun of her. She's not cross-eyed, but everybody said she was. So she was a little bit of an object of ridicule. But since then, she has, unfortunately, now she has passed away, but she has become really one of the most famous seminal artists of French pop music. So good for her. Good for her, because she probably had a difficult time when she was alive. So let's move forward. So here we are at the bus. We have to go a little bit up, and here we find probably one of the most enigmatic sculptures in all of Montmartre. So here we are in front of the Passe Muraille. Who knows what Passe Muraille means? Ah, leave. Tell us, leave. What does it mean?
Okay, you're on mute, Leave.
You're on mute, leave.
Allez, Liève.
There we go. It's based on the book.
Yes, completely, exactly. So Passe
It's a good book. I
Muraille is
recommend it. Mhm.
it's a great book. So it's based on a book written by a famous French author called Marcel Aimé, and he wrote his most famous book is the Passe Muraille. And Passe Muraille is basically the man who phases through walls, who has this ability, and it's very much in the style of 1940s and 1950s literature, which more 30s, 40s, and 50s literature, kind of this magical realism, like the French magical realism, where incredible things happen to ordinary people just to highlight how bizarre life is. And but it's not really for that I personally, and I wanted to talk about Marcel Aimé. He's very famous for a series of books for children called Les Contes du Chat Perché. So chat is a cat, and perché means that he's perched, he's on top. So it's Les Contes du Chat Perché, and they're incredibly wonderful stories for children. I remember reading them eagerly, and they are a staple of at least people of my generation. I don't know if children nowadays still read them, but when we were growing up, Victoria and I, they were a must read, and they were very easy, and all of them in a very surrealist flavor, but very easy and fun, and really enthralling to read. So I wanted to show him because very few people know about this sculpture, and very few people now still talk about Marcel Aimé, but he was with what's that famous poet?
Uh-oh.
I'm going completely senile. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Prévert, maybe Prévert.
Prévert. There. Thank you,
Okay.
Lise.
Okay,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. You're welcome.
Prévert, with this idea of showing the poetry and the magic of everyday life. He's very much one of the seminal figures of that literary project. So it's okay. That's good. We're in time. Okay. So now so this is more like going down memory lane for Victoria and me, because this is the Square Suzanne Valadon. It's the Square Junot. So it's just next to the Passe Muraille. So it's the top of Avenue Junot, and I'll show you the map in a few seconds just to show, so that you have an idea of where everything is situated. But this is basically the playground where Victoria and I grew up. We would go there. Our school was just next door, and after school we would always go there. We would spend hours playing there. So although I've kind of answered the question, do you know what a square is? A square is not a square. in Paris. It's not a square, it's a playground. It's a non-urbanized space where you have trees and places where people can hang out. I'm not going to say it's a garden because, as you can see, this is not very much a garden. It's very much a mineral. It's the mineral version, Parisian mineral version of what a London garden is, meaning no grass, but playgrounds, and it really is a space where anybody can go. It's not just, when we were growing up, it wasn't a space where only children went. So you had children, you had families, but you also had teenagers, you also had men playing pétanque, and you also had, trunks hanging out. It was a very eclectic environment, very much Parisian. So you had very different strides of life coming there. But here you have a boulodrome. So a boulodrome is the place where one plays pétanque. Don't ask me to explain what pétanque is because I have played pétanque, but it's like
Like
bocce ball.
bocce.
ball. It's
It's like
bocce.
bocce ball, but like the balls are metal, so it's a lot harder. And you don't want to, have somebody throwing a boule de pétanque at you because that might really hurt you. So, and that's what a square is. Although now they're probably more geared towards families and children. When we were growing up, it really was a place where people would, meet each other. It was where people congregated. It was like the place where everybody would find each other and at the end of the day.
It's like a
When you have
non-urbanized
children,
space.
obviously now people also find themselves at cafes, but when you have children, it's a good place to go. So that's what the square is.
Oh, don't forget to talk about the statue.
Oh,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
the statue. So,
Saint-Denis.
The morbid statue in the children's
Yes.
so
playground.
if you remember,
Yeah.
so that's what you for those who were there at the first Balade Parisienne, I told you about Saint-Denis. Saint-Denis is the patron saint of Paris. The legend says that he was decapitated probably by the Romans, who didn't like Christians at the time, and he rose up, took his own head, walked from, I guess, the island of the Cité to Montmartre and died there. And so obviously a fairly, not sure it really happened that way, but who knows? Who knows? It was a different time. So incredible things happened there. But since he's the patron saint of Paris. And for instance, just north of Paris, you have the city of Saint-Denis, where you have the Saint-Denis Basilica, and that's where all the French kings of France are buried. So it is a fairly important saint, and that's why it was considered perfectly normal to have a decapitated man symbolized in a children's playground. But that's France for you. It's always it's different things kind of clashing together.
Different
And
strokes for different folks.
but to be fair, I don't remember any of it. We probably just felt that it was perfectly normal, and it's now with a little bit of perspective. We're just like, this is a little odd, but the 70s, an odd time. Okay, so we did Passe Murale and Nana. So let's go to Moulin La Galette. So the Moulin La Galette is probably the most famous landmark of Paris. Everybody, more or less, at one point, thinks of Montmartre through the Moulin La Galette. So what is the Moulin La Galette? Well, it's no surprise here. It's a windmill, which I think is pretty obvious. But why was it a windmill? Well, because Paris is on a hill. Obviously, there was more wind coming on top, and in the I don't think in the Middle Ages, but definitely the 17th and the 18th century, windmills, the wind was a way to grind grain and other materials, and it was definitely a part of Parisian industry. obviously, with the advent of coal and steam engines, the windmills were less used, and they became like a famous. They became famous for their outdoor dances. It became a gathering spot for the Parisians. Basically, in the 1880s and 1890s, Le Moulin de Galette was the place to be. It was super trendy to go there because you could have fun. The Moulin Rouge was not too far away. The Place du Tertre was not too far away. So basically, it was the place where the best parties in town were being organized. It has been, it's artists such as Renoir and Van Gogh have immortalized the Moulin de Galette, Utrillo also, and it really captures. It really captures the past of like the Montmartre's past, but also something that's still very much alive within the spirit of Paris. Montmartre is still considered like a bohemian part of the city, where even though it's not anymore, I mean, it's an expensive and sometimes exclusive part of the city, but it still harbors that personality of this bohemian, bucolic, outside of the the tension and everyday life of Paris. So it's a place where one can, where nature and peace and quiet are easier to attain. So here, a few old pictures, just to show that at the time you had several windmills. It wasn't just le Moulin de la Galette, c'était les Moulins de la Galette. Here you probably have probably the best picture of that time, just to show that they were, even though they probably were not in use anymore, they were not grinding things anymore. They were still very much part of the Montmartre landscape. And here, probably my favorite painting of the Montmartre of the windmills. It's Van Gogh. He painted those painted that painting in 1886, and it's just a detail. Like the picture is much bigger and there's a lot more sky, but I think it's a beautiful depiction of the Moulin de la Galette. So Moulin de la Galette. Now let's go to Avenue Junot. I think there are questions. Should I take the questions? I see on the chat 6 questions.
Yeah, no, some of them are more comments.
Okay, so let's hear them. We can do a little.
Okay, so Lee just wanted
Yes.
to mention something about the cemeteries, but we haven't gotten there yet. Liv was wondering if you knew why Maurice Utrillo decided to change his name, because he was born Maurice Valadon.
Well, no, Suzanne Valadon was his mother. I think his father was Utrillo.
Okay, there you go.
Monsieur Utrillo. I mean,
Okay. Okay.
What?
Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
probably
okay.
that's probably the reality
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
situation.
Yes, 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 yes.
And then Lee also just wanted to mention, when we were talking about Dalida having lived in Egypt in her younger years, Lee just wanted to mention that Georges Moustaki was also Egyptian.
Yes, Georges Moustaki, they are part of the same. Also, Moustaki was a little more intellectual than Dalida. Dalida had was very popular. She was part of the what we call in French variété, la variété,
Vérité, oui.
which is popular music that is, which is very much the antithesis of Juliette Gréco and Léo Ferré, which is more like what we call chanson à texte, where like the words are very important. Here it was more all about entertainment glitz, and it was la variété. And to show that it's kind of nobody uses la variété anymore. But when we were growing up, we would watch on TV des émissions variété, and that was entertainment programs. So let's continue with l'Avenue Junot. So here, let me just go on find my notes. So really, we're going to the most sophisticated one. It's like the rich heart of Montmartre. This is l'Avenue Junot. So l'Avenue Junot, it's exudes elegance and charm with its tree-lined streets. So it's not a rue, it's not a boulevard, it's an avenue, which means leafy, lots of greens. And it really is probably the place where you have the most beautiful houses in Paris. You have townhouses there. So we've seen equivalents of l'Avenue Junot throughout our different balades. We saw them when we went to Les Buttes-Chaumont. We saw them somewhere else, but we've seen many of these like little pockets of Paris where you have, you know, not like different architecture. You don't have buildings, you have townhouses, usually architecturally interesting. But here it really is the blueprint of those neighborhoods. It's l'Avenue Junot, and it really is. First of all, it's like it's extremely quiet, extremely elegant, very sophisticated, and it really is upscale. If you have money to live Avenue Junot, you have money to live anywhere else in the world. It's probably real estate there is probably very expensive. But strolling along Avenue Junot, you witness beautiful gardens, elegant facades, and really a tranquility that, you know, that is really quite pleasing and relaxing. So I would like to show you a few beautiful buildings. So these, what I'm going to show you are townhouses. There are one building. So like a person owns the whole thing. So first of all, probably the most famous is Tristan Tzara house. So first of all, Tristan Tzara was a famous intellectual in the 30s, obviously well off because he was able to build that house. And he represents he was the key figure in the Dada movement. So I looked into, because I'm not a big expert of what Dada is, but Dada was in the 20s and the 30s an avant-garde artistic, more literary than art, that emerged after the First World War. And it's, as many of the literary movements at that time, they rejected all the traditional aesthetic values and embraced very much chaos, absurdity, and spontaneity. So they were very much in mechanical writing, writing things that one doesn't think, automatic, natural, I would say even organic writing. And they were very much into experimentation. So it has lost a little bit of its prime, because that type of experimentation has gone so much, you know, so many people have gone further in their experimentation. By the time, it was very much at the forefront of experimentation in terms of art and literature. So to be fair, to be honest, I don't know the difference between what a Dada is and what a surrealist is, but they were very much, I think, part of the same space. So this is a beautiful house. And it's a 5-story house. And so let me look who built it? Let me just check. I don't really have did I write it down? No, sorry. I don't have
I'll see if I can find it, James.
He built it, so it's very much an architectural project that also embodied a lot of his literary and artistic project, with this idea of kind of, you know, not following aesthetic tradition and aesthetic norms. And it's very much famous for the trend, like the separation between the two halves of the house, with brick and plaster on top, and there's a beautiful garden on top. So it really is quite a space. And also it's it's very difficult to find pictures of the inside, because it is a private house, and I think it still belongs to the Tzara family. So nobody really knows what it looks like inside, but I'm sure it is beautiful.
So, Austrian architect Adolf Loos.
Oh, it's Adolf Loos, of course. I knew it was very famous. Adolf Loos is, of course, a very famous architect, and very very famous, especially in the United States, because I think before the Second World War, he emigrated to New York and built a lot of buildings or a lot of houses in New York and in the United States. So he's a very much a reference in terms of modern architecture. And you can find it in Paris, which is wonderful. And here, the Maison Poulbeau. So Poulbeau was an artist, a very famous artist, and he's known for making these images of Paris children very famous. And so interestingly, it's just next to the Tristan Tzara house, but it's also like a very beautiful house. So it's a lot more, it's easier to figure out the spaces. They're like more open windows. It's very much a tourist art deco house with like a lot of space, very square and very rectangular forms, also with a beautiful terrace roof garden. I've seen pictures, and if you're interested, you can find pictures, and it's, huge spaces, very, very, very modern, but beautiful. And so this is not a house, even though it's called Villa Léandre. Villa is another way to, like it's like a street or an impasse, like a cul-de-sac in Paris, are often called villa. And you have beautiful townhouses, and you feel like you're transported in London, because that's very much the vibe and the type of architecture you find in London. But all of a sudden, you have that in Paris, and it's just a small street that branches off Avenue Junot. So really, if you are ever in Paris, it's very quiet. It's very sedate, but it's a beautiful space. It's a beautiful neighborhood. So, and if you feel like you want to splurge a little bit, spend your money, and you feel rich, and you feel ready to go in a place where you're going to have sophisticated French Parisians, go to l'Hôtel Particulier, because it really is the epitome of Parisian chic. So it is an hôtel particulier. So it's in a closed residence. So you have to phone in order to be able to go in. Yeah, you have to. Well, it's more like there's a digicode. You have to have a code to be able to access the house, and you have probably one of the nicest. You're in that oasis of green, of calm, of tranquility. So you have this beautiful veranda where you can like eat inside, but with a lot of light and greenery. You also have this wonderful patio, which, because I have had the pleasure of experiencing it in the summer when you're drinking a cocktail, it's wonderful. It really is wonderful. It's expensive, but it's wonderful. And if you have a lot of money, you can go to their very sophisticated restaurant. Well, I'm kind of insisting on how expensive it is. It is not. It's affordable. No, it's not affordable. You can. Let me say it's a little bit of a sacrifice, but it's not like you're going to the most expensive restaurant in Paris. It is, but it's expensive, yeah. So I would definitely recommend it, but it's maybe not what you do on a Monday evening. It's maybe like a celebration. When you celebrate your anniversary or you have a
Special
birthday.
occasion.
It's a special occasion, and but it really is. It's very in French, there's a word called tamisé. Tamisé, when like everything is soft and quiet and elegant and luxurious. It's une ambiance tamisée, where there's a little bit of music, but really everything is hushed, and it's very pleasant, very pleasant. So I strongly recommend it. And they also, about the atmosphere, they really serve very, the food is excellent, excellent. And the cocktails are wonderful. Oh my God, they're really good, but expensive. But there you go. So let's continue. So l'avenue Junot is here. So l'Hôtel Particulier is just there. You can't actually now cross through. You could, when we were growing up, you could cross from l'avenue Junot to
The
that's
Rue
La Rue Le Pic, La Rue Le Pic. Now you can't anymore. So you're going to have to go through, but it's not that much longer. And then you go to La Rue Colincourt, and you walking towards the Cimetière de Montmartre, you find a very typical French boulangerie. So the boulangerie Boris Slumet, which is it's not a fancy boulangerie, but it's very famous for its outside. And that's what you have. That's the look and feel of what boulangeries were in the 50s and the 60s. So you have boulangerie, you have pâtisserie, confiserie are sweets. It's confection. So and at the time when we were growing up, it really was all about those three. All boulangeries offered three, and so they offer. So it really is well preserved. I love all of that, and I think they won at one point like the prize of the best French baguette or the best Parisian baguette. So it's a well-known boulangerie, and really it's artisanal, and the look and feel is really reminiscent of past eras. I mean, I remember all of the boulangeries when we were growing up looked like that. Now most of them have disappeared, and it's one of the last ones. And they really, if you like tarte à la framboise, I don't understand why anybody would not like a tarte à la framboise, because they are delicious. They have very good, and as you can see, fairly affordable. $4.50, that's a good deal. So I would recommend going to la boulangerie Boris Slumet if you're in the neighborhood. And so what time is it? Are we? Oof, I have 10 minutes. And 10 minutes is fine. 10 minutes is fine. So let's go to the Cimetière de Montmartre. It really is, it's difficult to say it's like really the thing to do, because recommending, oh, you have to go to the cemetery is a little bit of a strange recommendation, but it's like the Père Lachaise. It is a space where you can find interesting architecture, interesting spaces, also the tombs or of famous people. It's not as big and as important as the Père Lachaise. Père Lachaise in the 20th is still like the most important cemetery in Paris, but the Cimetière Montmartre still, is the place where a lot of famous people from the neighborhood, notably Dalida, rest. So like most Parisian cemeteries, they offer ornate. There are many beautiful tombs and lush greenery. It's also extremely quiet in the way that cemeteries always are. So I'm not going to. I know that might be a difficult topic for some people, so I'm not going to recommend it as a must do. And you're going to have it's a place where people there are a lot of difficult emotions that sometimes exist in these places. So, but it is as a testament of Parisian life and French culture. It's really interesting. In addition or furthermore, it's interesting also for two other aspects. First of all, how the cemetery interacts with the city itself. As you can see, that when the cemetery, well, you might not necessarily see it there, but when the cemetery was built, it was, built within a fairly open and fairly bucolic environment. But since then, the city has basically built itself around, and you feel we have there's a real tension between the cemetery and the surrounding city. So you can see that in order to facilitate leaving Montmartre, they built a bridge on top of the cemetery, and they started also building around the cemetery. So you have on the bottom, you have these tombs and these and you have on top, you have very modern and sometimes really prime real estate, which is in of itself interesting. But even more interesting, you have the bridge that really basically at certain points is just above the tombs or the architecture of the tombs. I don't know, the sarcophaguses or like there's a specific word, I can't find it, but you can feel here, you really feel the
Mausoleum.
mausoleums, exactly, the mausoleums. So you really feel the tension between the city and the cemetery, which is an interesting, and that really is specific to Montmartre. You don't have that at all at the Père Lachaise. It's more open, there's more space here. You really have the feeling that, you know, the city is allowing the cemetery to still exist, but it really is limited in space and time. And I don't think it's possible to be buried there anymore, or it's extremely expensive. So, and I just wanted to maybe end the presentation with maybe introducing you to 3 or 4 very famous people buried at the Cimetière de Montmartre. So the first one is, and I'm going to ask you each time if you know them. So, and they're not difficult to know. I mean, like most of them, they're fairly famous. So who knows Louis Jouvet?
Yeah, I mean, he was a French actor. So, I mean, unless you're well versed in French films of the 1940s, 30s, 40s, into the 50s, you probably would not know
Yeah.
Louis Jouvet. Mm-hmm.
He's famous. He was in Quai des Orfèvres and Hôtel du Nord, but his most famous role was in a movie called Drôle de Drame, which is funny drama. And there's a very famous scene where he says, bizarre comme c'est bizarre, which, you know, in of itself, it's difficult to translate, but the fact that he keeps on repeating the word bizarre, bizarre, vous avez dit bizarre comme c'est bizarre, is very famous. And when we were growing up, it was definitely a reference that everybody knew. But they're very good movies. They're, you know, 30s, 40s, and 50s movies. So maybe the quality of the picture is not as great as it used to be. But he's a and he's very known for this. He has a very specific way of a very remote kind of like isolated way of acting. And he died a long time ago, but that's one of the people buried at the Cimetière de Montmartre. So much more famous, François Truffaut.
Ah oui.
So, bien sûr, François Truffaut. So François Truffaut is one of the most famous French directors. He died quite a long time ago, in 1984. He died of cancer. Really, when he was at the epitome of his success, you know, he was still his death was a huge surprise for everybody, and he became he really symbolized the nouvelle vague. So this new way of filming, of telling stories, of also of the topics that were being discussed, more aligned with modern post-war preoccupations. And his most famous film is Les 400 coups, the movie that would propel him to fame. So it's the story of this young kid who does 400 coups. To do 400 coups in French means to do, you know, a lot of mischief and, you know, always get into trouble. So he probably his most famous film, the one that really kind of has cemented his fame, is Jules et Jim with Jeanne Moreau, the beautiful story of a three-way relationship. And also Le Dernier Métro with Catherine Deneuve is also a beautiful movie about about artistry during the German occupation. So it's very interesting. So again, if you are at the Cimetière de Montmartre or not, you can discover François Truffaut, and I recommend discovering his movies. He made a lot of movies, and most of them are good, to be honest. I really like most of them. And two very famous performers in France, Michel Berger and France Gall. Who knows them?
I've heard of them.
Yeah, so again,
Okay.
Yeah.
These
Oui,
guys
Very
are
oui,
famous.
oui.
So they were married, and he was the composer. She was the singer, but he also sang. And they are seminal figures. He died very young in 1992. He was like less than, I think he was maybe like 45 years old. And she died later on, but still fairly young. And they were very famous because he would write the music and she would sing the songs. And really, they symbolize pop music, French pop music of the 80s and of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, although he was dead in 1982. But, and one of his most famous creations, which I have in it, is like a musical called Starmania. And
Yeah,
really,
rock opera.
Starmania is really a pillar of French culture. Everybody knows Starmania. Everybody, all of the songs are famous. It really is. So if you ever want to, and it's also, it's not like Dalida. It has a very, I think he had a very strong French personality, and but he understood this how to create like music that had a lot of impact, and he really followed a lot of Anglo-Saxon or American codes in terms of music. So it was there was a lot of depth, but it was also very easy to instantly likable.
Mhm.
So I would definitely, and she, both of them, all of their songs are part of everybody knows them and everybody likes them. And it's great music. But so if you're at the cemetery, at the Cimetière de Montmartre, you can visit their tomb. But also, I would definitely recommend discovering their music. It's very easy to like. It's very, there's a danceability to it that is very, very engaging.
James, Sally wanted to mention, I think it's Sally, that Dalida is also buried at the Cimetière de Montmartre.
Yes, completely. Yes. And her tomb is probably where everybody goes, even more than Michel Berger and France Gall. I mean, again, to highlight to underline how significant Dalida has become as a symbol of, everybody likes her. She's in death, she has become the French Dolly Parton in many ways. And so to finish and so what time is it? Oh boy, it is time. So Le Moulin Rouge. So I'm not going to go too much in detail with the Moulin Rouge because first of all, everybody knows the Moulin Rouge. It was built in 1889, and it really symbolizes with the Moulin La Galette, and I think the parallel between the Moulin La Galette and Le Moulin Rouge is obvious. Le Moulin was symbolized Montmartre, and the Moulin Rouge became really the place to be, where like with Montmartre entertainment came to life. And it really is, in many ways, one of the pillars of La Belle Époque, which is this period of time from basically 1890 until the First World War that really symbolizes one of the most important creative, artistic, and literary moments in French life. And I think, Victoria, we are organizing a series of presentations on La Belle Époque next month. So I'm not going to say more about La Moulin Rouge because if you're interested, we are going to really go in depth of Le Moulin Rouge, and we're going to talk about Toulouse-Lautrec. We're going to talk about La Goulue, which was this famous dancer that really captured the fame of the Moulin Rouge. And well, that's that, I think. Well, that's the Moulin Rouge in 1921. But you can see how, this is what it is now. So a lot more streamlined, I would say. It has a more but it still shows that it's a creation. I mean, it was never a real windmill, never. It's a construction. And it really is more something to show the connection and the filiage between Le Moulin La Galette and Le Moulin Rouge. And still today, it's a place where, you have shows. but it has become very, it's not as, I would say, creative as it once was. It's more like, would you qualify Le Moulin Rouge? It's,
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of a music hall, but I mean, it is a
It's-
tourist trap now. I mean,
it has become a tourist attraction. It's not where you see like, the best performances and where you are at the edge of Paris nightlife.
no,
No,
I mean, you
it
go
is a tourist
there
trap.
to see a performance of the French can.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
where
and you have like a very and also it's like a dinner service, so you eat something. So very much if you there's something called le comité d'entreprise in French, which is like the employees organization that receives money from the employer to organize activities for the employees, and it's a mandatory organization in all big companies, and it's very much what a comité d'entreprise will offer in terms of entertainment. So it's very much on y va avec le comité d'entreprise. That's something you do with your colleagues when you are somewhere in Paris, when you are coming from the south of France to Paris and you want to spend a nice night out, you do the Le Moulin Rouge with your colleagues. And then you wander off to Pigalle and find maybe more specific entertainment there.
okay, which we will not get into.
Well, I won't talk about, I'll stop there. So,
Okay.
but we will talk about the myth and the reality of Le Moulin Rouge next month with our sessions on La Belle Époque.
The Mosaic series. Mhm.
Yeah, we'll do the glamour and the seedier side of La Belle Époque.
D'accord. Okay.
Okay, so that's that.
Hold on. It's not that yet.
Are there questions?
Wait.
Questions, my dears?
Hold on. Let me see. I'm
leaving.
scrolling
No.
through. Okay, so
Oh, Sally has a question.
well, hold on. Let me look. I'm looking through.
Well, I can see her. I can see
Looking
her
through the
hand.
chat first. Hold on a second. Let me see. Let me
I'm
go.
sorry, Sally. Victoria doesn't want to let you speak.
Sally wanted to know, I mean, in reference to the Hôtel Particulier, you know, do you have any idea how one would get the code? You mentioned that.
Oh no, you get
very
it with
private.
the reservation. I mean, it's like you can't just drop it. That's what I'm saying. You need a reservation, so it's that type of place where you need a reservation. You need to be able. You're going to have some. It's very chichi, if you know the word, like in French, like
Yeah.
quelque chose qui chichi. It's a little un peu hors gardé. It's a little bit like so. It's one aspect of Parisian life where like people when you're sophisticated places, people tend to tend to take themselves a little too seriously. And it's that space, that's energy, but it's still very much worth it because the service is wonderful, the food is wonderful, and the environment is wonderful, but it's a little shishi
Mhm.
and expensive.
Okay.
But so you'll get the code when you make the reservation.
Okay, so go ahead, Sally.
So I also have a comment. I was lucky enough to stay for a week in a apartment right near the Moulin de la Galette,
Okay.
and can get into the little garden back there. It's a private garden, but it's still very green and benches and all this kind of stuff for the very rich people that live there. It was really a surprise to me to find such a place, in the middle of say in the middle of Paris. It was one of those little fun memories.
Oh wow, good for you. But that's definitely an aspect of the neighborhoods we covered. Is that there are a lot of hidden places, a lot of gardens, but a lot of it is nobody knows it exists because they're private spaces, limited. They're not open. So good for you because discovering all of that is wonderful. you know, I discovered it when I went to l'Hôtel Particulier. You just discovered that you have huge gardens behind these closed walls. So it's wonderful.
Frances has her hand raised. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Frances.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that when I walked around through Montmartre, I found, maybe you mentioned it earlier before I joined in, but I found the place where Picasso studio was. He had a studio there and painted there, stood outside of it and saw that. Did you mention that earlier? Because I
No, but it's le Bateau Lavoir.
Yeah, I don't remember where, but
It's Bateau Lavoir. I think it's Rue Durantin. We didn't go this, but to be perfectly honest, there's so many things to talk about in Montmartre. We probably are going to do Montmartre Part 3, where we go up Moulin Rouge and we're going to go to, you know, that side. We did that side, we did the other. Now there's a third side with a lot of things to discover. So we probably will do it.
On that same trip, though, I did walk right past this Moulin Rouge. It'd be fair to call it a nightclub, the way we would call it a nightclub in Canada.
So there are two things that you have. If you see there's Machine.
Yeah.
That's a nightclub. That's a nightclub. It's been around forever, but that's a nightclub where, you know, you go away if you want to. If you have a lot, and just next to it, you still have the music hall, the entertainment. Yeah, but Machine, it's called La Machine.
Yeah.
And they do concerts from time to time. It's a good space, but most of the parties are not great. So not that anybody would think of going there, but it's you know, it is definitely. So there are two specific separate spaces that have different types, that are different venues.
Yeah, and different audiences.
And definitely different audiences. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have a question, a comment? You can go ahead and...
Victoria?
Oui.
Oh, je voulais simplement... Est-ce que j'ai ma vidéo ou pas?
Mais oui, je te vois, Lise.
Ok,
Je te vois, Lise.
Ok, je voulais simplement mentionner qu'en fait, le moulin de la Galette...
In English, my dear. In English.
Oh, pardon. So, I just wanted to add that le moulin de la Galette gets his name from la galette, of course, which in the old days was the brown bread. And they made the brown bread from the flour that, you know, grain that we grinded.
So yeah, it was, of course, windmills are used to ground meat.
Ground meat?
Wheat. Ground wheat, not grind meat.
Guys!
English is so difficult. There's so many words. And which creates flour. And so and I think at one point it was one of the main one of the main places where the flour for the Parisian boulangeries were
Yes, and that's why they had so many mills.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know.
We have another question from Francis.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know I had my hand up.
Oh,
but
okay, so you
on me. Okay, I'll mention something. When the architecture in that Avenue, you know, those kind of townhomes, that kind of structure is very reminiscent to me of where I grew up in Montreal. And I think it carried over some of that influence. I found it very traditional Montreal kind of looking.
Yes, it's true. Some of them have this Anglo-Saxon feel that you like. Villa Léandre is very much feel transported in England. And it really is, Avenue Junot is a place where, I mean, we've shown it's here and there, but it's probably you have the most unique architecture at Avenue Junot. It has very much, it's very pristine, and you can see that it's obviously there's a lot of
clean lines.
Yeah, they're very clean line, and each of them are very different from each other. So they're very differentiated, and it's very striking.
Lee.
Yeah, what I was going to comment on, you were talking about the organizations in the various companies in France, and you know, they would organize something at the Moulin Rouge, but these organizations are really important. My friend who worked for Simon Lafarge has been able to travel with
yes.
these groups, discount rates, everything. So it's not only for people who still work there, it's for the retraités, the retirees as well. It's too
completely.
bad that the States doesn't have something like that, because it
it's
allows people
wonderful.
who
I
might
mean,
not have been in high-paying jobs to go places. They
I
might
mean,
not.
yeah, and that's, I mean, it's true that I really, my description did really not describe how important they are, because they are considered a benefits. They're part of the benefits package of every benefits package that everybody employees gets when you join a company. And some of them, you know, when you work for a big company or like a heavily unionized company, I mean, our mother worked for IBM. The IBM Comité d'entreprise was famous for how generous it was. I mean, like when we were growing up, I mean, at least me, most of my vacation, I would go 3 to 4 weeks to the IBM camps, and it was really like top rate accommodations. So yeah, we would have presents every Christmas from the Comité d'entreprise, and it really offers a lot of benefits for employees, and they still do. It's part of the law, so that's not something that's going away, but it's probably right now more and more part of how people, you know, earn their, you know, live. It's not a nice to have. It's part of really. It's become a necessary supplement to their income.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Elizabeth, did you want to make a comment? I don't know where Elizabeth is.
Je suis ici, I'm here. I
Ah.
just got my question answered. The comité d'entreprise.
Le
Comité d'entreprise. So it's not a union. It's something that all companies that have more than 50 employees have to organize.
Wow.
So there's like a specific part of their budget of masse salariale. How would you say masse salariale? Like the amount of money that is dedicated to paying employees. You take a percentage of that, and that's so you have to, it's 2% or 1%, but it's a percentage, and that's the money that the company gives to the comité. And some companies have, you know, because of agreements between unions and the company, some companies give more, over 2 to 3 to 5% of masse salariale, which is sometimes in hundreds and millions of francs. So some comités d'entreprise have a lot of money. Like the most famous one was the SNCF, you know, the railway company. They were, I think 5% of their masse salariale was given to the comité d'entreprise. So they were extremely wealthy.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's time out.
Okay.
So James, I just want to thank you again for putting this
Oh, it was a
together.
pleasure.
I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their beautiful day here in Tucson.
Yes. Have a great
voilà.
day, everybody. It was a pleasure. It was a blast as usual. So have a great day. Goodbye.
Merci, James. À la
Au
prochaine.
revoir.
Au
À la
revoir.
prochaine.
Salut.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.